Hello, it's Ren Presents time. I'm your host, Ren, and today we continue with the Hazards of the Old Ones, Part 3, Chapter 15, The Invisible Enemy. Last week we downshifted from the horrific fight going on in Xandarr Keep to reflect on the lovely southern roots of Lieutenant Verlin and how she came to be, how she was a lifelong fan of Captain Davidge since the time she saw him at the wedding that never was, and a peruser of his infrequent posts, and a peruser of his posts once he became more popular, once he started fighting with Princess Marlith of Xandar, to the Battle of Two Pitch Nebula, where she decided she wanted to do her part for the League, wanted to see the stars, and serve in the fleet. She wasn't allowed to serve in the fleet. Her father wouldn't let her. He would not sign the required documents. So she joined the Stellar Marines, was treated very well in the Marines, and grew to love the service. We saw that the Black Hats tipped their hand, and that a previously painted cloaked ring of shadow tech now circles the planet Xandar. Things aren't looking good for Xandar, as Xandar Keep is crawling with Black Hats and STTs. So, pretty unpleasant situation down there even as we speak. And we are going to do not one chapter, The Invisible Enemy, Chapter 15. We're going to also proceed to Chapter 16 under Xandar Keep, as Chapter 15 is only a few pages long. So, before we begin, let me refresh you on what was happening. Captain Davidge sees under a deep painted cloak that the House of Xandar was all dead, long dead, seated at their table, all strangled to death, and generously rotting down to the points where their skeletons are just there in the grit of the afternoon sun. Princess Rock reveals herself and becomes a royal nuisance. She destroys Lieutenant Kylos's tweeter bird and starts generally doing quite a bit of damage. She is a very good swordsman. As I've said before, I do not have weak, hapless villains. This is the League of Elder, and when you face a major villain, they're going to be tough, and Princess Rock is really tough. She's a very good swordsman, and she's not a very good matchup for Captain Davidge, who is also an incredible swordsman, but he's having to deal with his 77-pound King Karg, which normally he's a good enough swordsman that its weight and the slightly reduced speed that causes him while he uses it any inconvenience. However, in this case, Princess Vrock is using the Baron, which is the Los Capricos weapon of House Xandar, and it's a very light, very fast, very sharp sword. It's not the kind of sword that will kill you in one cut, but it will wear you down eventually and kill you. Let's proceed to the ugliness in Xandar Keep right away. First chapter this evening, Chapter 15, The Invisible Enemy. Syg lifted a Silvertech wall. Instantly, it dented and warped with Shadowtech blows on the other side. Syg closed her fist, reared up over the wall, and loosed a Silvertech blast. Having no idea what, if any, damage she had just done, she swept this way and that. She noticed several of the Carahill figurines continuing to expand. Points, stens, and TKs were being sent their way, and they only had seconds. She fished around in her shawl and threw her Carahill figurines. They instantly began growing and coming to life. Tack, 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 clack! Kai's SK emptied. "Get Dav out of here," Innes shouted, and spinning his jet staff, leapt over the Silvertech wall. "It is! Get back here!" Kai cried, remagging her SK. Syg shook Dav, trying to rouse him. Something clattered into the other side of the wall roughly. Kai crouched down, having no idea what was coming. Holding Dav about the neck, Syg prepared to make her last stand. A company of Marines in ground transports entered from the far end of the hall with all their usual aplomb. They quickly exited their transport and established a defensive formation. With them was a lone sister, and with a wave of her hand, the Black Hat's illusion came down in all its various layers. The power of even a single sister was awesome to behold. Syg looked around, finally able to see. The hall was a neglected, dusty mess. There was a din of shouting and clanging. The Marines were heavily engaged with the Holgismen, who were struggling to get to the newly arrived sister. The tack of their SKs filling the hall in a tap dance of death and smoke. A surge of STTs came at them. The sisters swept them aside, temporarily clearing the hall. "Captain Davidge, fall back!" the Marine shouted. She watched a white Carahill figurine grab a Black Hat by the neck and fly her struggling body out of the hall, with several more following. She saw the table and the dead bodies Dav had been talking about. "Be safe, love," Syg said, kissing him as she cocooned him in Silvertech. Then she stood against her wall and prepared to fight. Kai cocked her SK and then stood up with Syg, blasting the weapon. Of all things, her thoughts were on Tweeter, her little bird, now dead. She knew if she got out of this alive, in her first quiet moment, she would grieve for him, as if he were a family member or a close friend. Beyond, a gaggle of Holgismen moved about in a chaotic fashion. Gouts of Shadowtech emerged from the back of the hall, only to be displaced by the lone sister. A Black Hat was TK'd into the air, squeezed and crushed to death, and then cast aside, and then another, and then another. Point. Several Marines exploded in a spray. Another point. This one got absorbed by a black Carahill figurine. She watched him blow blue flames over the attacking Black Hat and disappear. Syg squeezed her fists, built up a charge, and with a wave of her arm, blasted aside a mass of Holgismen. They toppled over, gutted in a steaming pile like dead mackerel. She swept the other way, and more Holgismen fell. Kai hammered her shots into the mass. She noticed Holgismen were clambering up over the side from below, trying to get behind them. She turned and gunned them down, sending them falling back into the masses below. Syg expected the Black Hats to disengage at some point. That's how they normally fought. They engaged, did some damage, and then withdrew. This fight was different, though. The Black Hats seemed crazed and insane. They seemed determined to fight it out to the bitter end. Syg sent out another seeker familiar. It floated and fired, blasting holes in the Holgismen's lines and melting hordes of STTs in its light, but was quickly blown to shreds by multiple Shadowtech hits. She crashed it into the Black Hats where it exploded, killing at least 2 of them, and probably 50 Holgismen. More charged in from the interior. These Black Hats were fighting for keeps. The number of Carahill figurines was rapidly dwindling. Now that she could see her enemies, she could counter them. A Black Hat tried to send a Sten onto their position. Syg met it with one of her own and held it. "Second from the left, Kai!" she shouted. Kai took aim and blasted her head off. The Black Hat, wide open, an aim shot from Kai, was as good as dead. A few more fell that way until the Black Hat stopped trying to Sten and kept them sucked in, saving themselves from Kai's murderous SK. A wave of STTs came in. Syg met them with a blast of Silvertech, blowing them apart. More Shadowtech, more Holgismen. Syg swept them aside, bodies flying, bodies chewed up, silver rending limb from limb. The Holgismen, single-minded as ever, wanted the sister, and they charged, regardless of the danger. The Marines, though ranks thinned by the endless attack, could no longer stop them. The Holgismen breached their lines and fell on the sister, and screaming, she died in a tangle. They held her severed head aloft and fought over it. The Black Hats then turned their full attention to Syg and Kai. stuck to the western side of the hall in the center section of the room. They were surrounded. She threw up a large stem and killed more Hulgesmen than she could count in an instant. One of the Black Hats countered it in a huge clashing spark. Syg dropped the stem, panting. She was running out of endurance. Even at full strength and health, this fight would have been exhausting, and weak as she was, Syg knew she was just about done. Finished. Syg couldn't see Inez in the mass of people. He must be dead, had to be dead. She threw up another Silvertech wall and tossed small Silvertech balls that exploded in a hail of sharp fragments. The balls exploded. Hulgesman went down. A Black Hat clutching her throat also went down. Blast crushed her into the wall. She strained to keep it up. Kai targeted a newly arriving Black Hat and got her right through the eye. She targeted another, but she was stunned. "Syg," she cried, "we can't stay here." "Kai, get next to Dav," she said weakly. Kai went to full auto and emptied another magazine. She then crouched down and got next to Dav. "Where's Inez?" Syg screamed. "He's dead." Syg laid down, put her arms around the cocoon Davidge and built a Silvertech bubble around the three of them. She waited for the inevitable thud of a Shadowtech blast, which came seconds after she created it. The Silvertech ball blasted out of the hall and went down several levels into the open courtyard below. Hulgesmen clamored around it, beating on the warm silver spear with their filthy hands. STTs crawled all over it. Commander Mapes, accompanied by two of his technicians, charged onto the bridge. They quickly made their way to the helm, and the technicians moving in and examining it. "Sir!" one of them shouted. "The helm appears to be floating." "How can that be?" Mapes said. They opened the back panel, exposing a complex array of connectors and linkages, the helm wheel being connected to literally thousands of thrusters, levelers, and flood ports. It was by far the most delicate piece of equipment on the bridge. "Sir," the tech said, "the helm has been completely disconnected." The black ring loomed large in the cone. "Commander, we need helm control immediately," Verlin shouted. "It'll take hours to reattach everything, and then we'll need days to properly calibrate it," Mapes replied. Verlin pointed at the cone full of black. "Commander, we've about 3 minutes." And with that, we conclude the exciting Chapter 15, The Invisible Enemy, a very chaotic battle. At the beginning of the fight, Syg and Ki couldn't see what they were fighting. It was just looked like an empty hall to them. Davidge is still incapacitated from his waft, which wafting more than one person is very, very taxing, and he wafted 3 people, and so he is down and he is not getting back up. A sister and her marines arrived, set up some lines, and began battling, and the sister immediately threw down the painted cloak. That's what sisters are adept as, throwing Shadowtech aside. They see all the Black Hats with their Hulgesman guards and engage in a massive battle. And the sister is killing Black Hats left and right, just picking them up and with her TK, her mind, basically, and crushing them. And normally, when fighting the Black Hats, if you kill 1 or 2 Black Hats, they retreat. But in this case, these Black Hats aren't retreating. In fact, more and more keep charging into the hall, setting up their lines and attacking. They're attacking with all their gifts, with Shadowtech, with points, with stens. It's quite a chaotic battle. Eventually, with all these reinforcements coming in, they get through the Marines and they kill the sister, and that's always a tragedy, and that doesn't happen very often. Black Hats usually aren't able to defeat a sister. Only a few have ever been killed by the Black Hats. And then making a last stand, Syg cocoons everybody in a Silvertech ball. It's launched from the keep down into the courtyards below, and that's where we currently are. So we move on to Chapter 16. One more thing. As we noticed in the last chapter, the helm wheel was no longer responsive. The engineers come up to the bridge under the command of Commander Mapes, and they see that the helm has been completely disconnected. No one can figure out why, but that's what they got in front of them, and they're heading right into this Shadowtech ring around the planet, which probably isn't a very safe place to be. So, lots of things happening both in orbit and on the planet. We move on. Chapter 16, Under Xandarr Keep. So let's begin immediately. The silver ball came to rest in a courtyard fairly far from the raging hall above. The courtyard was literally crawling with Hulgusmen and STTs. They surrounded the spear, stabbed at it with their night knives, and pounded it with their dirty fists. The sphere exploded outwards in a blast of silver energy, killing many Hulgusmen instantly, dismembering and badly wounding a great number more. The rest were thrown high into the air, many out beyond the edge of the courtyard. Kai rolled out and took a defensive stance. They were right in the middle of the courtyard. Head on a swivel, she looked around. There were a couple of wounded stragglers to the west, and she gunned them down. Several bodies had been thrown into the air and landed with a life-ending crash. Everybody else was gone or dead for the moment, but she could hear a great mass of angry shouting coming from nearby. Syg, in near total exhaustion, wept and shook Davidge. Dav, wake up! Davidge, however, was not moving. Kai grabbed the captain and pulled him up. Syg, we've got to get to a better position now. Help me with him. Kai, dragging Davidge, started moving him towards the far wall. Syg tried to help her, but barely able to stand. She was more of a hindrance than a help. Kai picked the tiny Syg up with one arm and continued with both of them. Kai, I can barely keep my eyes open. I'm gonna pass out, Syg said. Don't worry about me. Get Dav to safety. Drop me, Kai. Shut up, Kai yelled. Kai got to the wall and, arms aching, dropped them. She remagged her SK. This is it, Syg, my last mag. I got 25 shots and I'm done. Syg collapsed to the ground, exhausted. Kai quickly looked around again. Dead bodies, sundered limbs everywhere, roaring and shouts coming from all around. Soon this courtyard will be overrun again. She checked her holster for more Carahill figurines, but they were used up. Heck of a gift they were, she had to admit. Those silly-looking little things held the line until they were able to see what they were fighting. If she survived, she'd have to thank him for them later. She wondered about the STTs. There were thousands upon thousands of them crawling around like cockroaches in the halls above. Each one of them had the ability to either kill, give away their position, poison them, or tag them. So far, this courtyard seemed strangely devoid of them. Of all the horrors of fighting Shadowtech, STTs were probably the worst, the sneakiest, and the hardest to spot. She'd probably rather fight a Shadowtech beast or a Hulgusman straight up than wonder if an STT was lurking about. Besides that, they reminded her of bugs, and she didn't like bugs. No time to wonder over her good fortune. Where could they go? What could they do? The sky turned black. Must be a storm coming in. She glanced up. The sky was full of roiling clouds of Shadowtech, layer after layer, rising to a towering height. Occasional patches of purple shone through along with traveling rays of sunlight. And what was that thing to the south rising up through the breaks in the clouds? Was that a ring? A black ring? Xandar didn't have a ring. Creation, this place is scragged, Max. No kidding around. The Black Hats had dropped their own painted illusion and tipped their hand. No more hiding. Here they were. As Kai gazed at the dance of black clogging the sky, a Hulgusman crawling with STTs dropped down from above, surprising her. Falling together into the dusty ground, he put his filthy hands on her throat, the STTs running down his arms to get to her. Feeling the life being squeezed out of her, Kai lifted her SK and pressed the stun button. SK standing for stun, kill, though Kai rarely ever used the stun portion. In this instance, she had to conserve shots, even in this life or death situation. A fierce blast of air hit the Hulgusman in the neck, and he doubled over, holding his throat. The STTs were all over her. She whirled around, batting them off, hitting the stun trigger again and again, careful not to get herself with the blasts. The Hulgusman made a gargling sort of noise. Kai reared up and clubbed him hard over the head with her pistol butt over and over again until he dropped. The SK had a very hard, knobby butt for just that very purpose. More STT streamed away from his dead body. Panting, Kai turned, just in time to get walloped in the face by another Hulgusman. She fell and dropped her gun. The Hulgusman flopped on top of her and reared back and smashed her in the jaw. Everything spun. He reared back again to finish her off. Something chirped and light blossomed around the Holgisman's head. Tweeter! He was back in one piece and was greatly annoying the Holgisman, who pawed at him with his filthy arms. STTs falling away. Recovering, Kai reached, got her gun, and blew his head off in a spray of gun smoke and ruined flesh. Kai threw the body aside and Tweeter settled into her hands. She was overjoyed. "I thought you were a goner, Tweets," she said, half laughing, half crying. She looked him over. He seemed fine. His Silvertech body completely reformed like nothing had ever happened to it. "I should have known you'd be okay." She looked around, ready to fight the swarms of STTs that had been crawling over their bodies. They were on the sandy floor of the courtyard, flipped upside down, legs waving feebly. She watched as they slowly dissolved into pockets of ash. "That's weird," she said casually, fascinated by what she was seeing. She heard noise, shouting, roaring, Holgismen, lots of them on the move. She looked to Tweeter. "We are in sorry shape here, Tweets. Can you get us to safety? Someplace safe? Can you do that?" Tweeter chirped and flew to the south, settling on a post far off in the distance. He waited for her as usual, dragging both Dav and Syg. Kai followed him, her faith in the little silver bird, now unshakable. Seeing him reinvigorated her, lent her strength. As she approached Tweeter's position, she heard an angry mob moving about somewhere in a nearby courtyard behind her. Tweeter took flight and flew through an open doorway, turning to the east. Kai following as best she could, her heart pounding from the strain of carrying the dead weight of both Dav and Syg. Tweeter flew into another open courtyard, the dome of the keep rising high above in the afternoon haze, flecked with shadow tech, looking like a huge mottled turnip. He settled on a large pot near a far wall about 100 yards away. She stopped for a moment to take a breath when someone touched her from behind. She whirled around, dropping Dav and Syg and pulling her SK. "It's me, Kai, it's me," a torn, bleeding Inez said, his bloody and dented helmet sitting askew and backwards on his head. Kai gasped with relief and threw her arms around him, a rare display of emotion from the normally subdued Kai. "Inez, good creation, what happened to you? We thought you were surely dead." "I managed to get through the lines of Holgismen and got one of the Black Hats in the head. Might have killed her too, I think. A Black Hat was about to point me when a white Carahil grabbed her and carried her off. Heck of a thing to see. Then I got locked up with a bunch of Holgismen and there was this loud rushing sound and a burst of light. Must have been a sweep of Silvertech from Syg, which isn't a fun thing to experience, let me tell you. In any event, I got knocked off the side of the courtyard." "How's Dav and Syg?" "Bad. Dav's out cold from the waft still, and Syg is so exhausted she can barely stand." Inez groaned. He was carrying Dav's carg, that 77-pound slab of metal. "This thing was nearly the death of me," he said, pointing to the big dent in his helmet. "I wish I could just drop it, but Dav would probably kill me if I did. Here, you carry it for a while." "I don't want it, but don't you dare drop it either. I'll bust you in the chops if you drop it. Come on, we need to keep moving." "Any thoughts on where we're going?" "I've been following Tweeter. So far he's got me through. He's going to lead us to somewhere safe until we can reach the ship." Kai continued to drag Davage, and Inez, encumbered with Dav's carg, took Syg. They made their way to the wall where Tweeter was sitting. "So what now?" Inez asked. "You should see all the STTs a few courtyards back." Kai looked at the wall, tall, not scalable, at least not by her, with about a dozen large earthen pots stacked up against the base. She spun around, looking for anything. "Well, I don't know. I asked him to get us to safety. He's never wrong." In the distance, they both could hear a great roaring, a mass of angry Holgismen heading towards them, possibly just a courtyard or two away. Inez looked up at the sheer wall. "Well, Kai, I can scale this wall, but I'm pretty sure you can't. Come on, we gotta keep moving." Kai stared at the wall. No, he's brought us here to this very spot. There must be something." She had a thought. Wait, tunnels! Tunnels, don't you see? The Marines have a report of a maze of them running under Xandarr Keep. There must be a tunnel under this wall. There must be. Help me with these pots." They moved the huge earthen pots aside. When they made a space, Tweeter hopped down and vanished through a tiny crack at the bottom of the wall. The roaring was getting nearer. Frantically, Kai felt around the bottom for a switch or lever. anything. Well, maybe there's no access point here. Maybe it's just a vent, Inez said, expecting to see the enemy at any moment. No. There has to be something we can use. He's brought us here for a reason. She reached into the crack and felt around. A moment later, her fingers found what felt like a small lever. Here! Yes, here's a lever, but I can't move it. Let me, Inez said, moving Kai out of the way. He jammed Dav's carg into the crack, found the lever, and began hitting it. It's rooted in there good. He continued pounding. There it's moving. A small, cleverly hidden trapdoor opened. Beneath was Tweeter sitting there, happy and patient as ever. There was some sort of strange, interlocking symbol painted on the dirty floor near the opening. Inez and Kai didn't have time to puzzle over it. They quickly put Dav and Syg down into the hole. The roaring seemed to be just around the corner. Hold on, Kai cried. I'm gonna put the pots back. Straining, she moved the pots back into place as best she could, just in time to see a horde of Holgismen and 7 black hats enter from the far end. She slid down to the hole and, together with Inez, closed the trap door. They could hear the racket of people searching for them from above. They didn't see you, did they? Inez asked. I don't think so. See? Kai said, whispering, holding Tweeter on her finger. This little guy is never wrong. Inez gave Tweeter's beak a rub. I don't think Lady Poe realizes how potent her cute little Silvertech creations really are. That fins thing she made for me, I was examining it in my office. It's a marvel. It's a work of genius. Such a thing, made in quantity, could revolutionize the Hospitallers. I showed it to one of the sisters, and she nearly fell out of her headdress. I know. Inez inspected the odd painted symbol on the floor, following its lines with his hands. Kai, he said, this is a Zaffin Kabbalah symbol. It's pretty, she said. Come on, let's get Dav and Syg safe. They made to move further into the gloom of the tunnel. They crawled through a small space for several feet that opened up into a larger chamber, Tweeter's silver body lighting it up, and there, illuminated in the silver light, were dozens, if not hundreds of people. The technicians on the bridge had managed to hook up a few of the leads to the helm wheel. As such, the helm had basic control over the ship, nose up, nose down, bank left, bank right, but no AM or PM control whatsoever. Sari grabbed the wheel and tugged on it, the black material of the ring filling the cone. Somebody help me, it's too heavy, she yelled, the wheel being completely out of calibration and too heavy to move. The techs and Commander Mapes latched onto the wheel, and together the 4 of them lifted the nose and banked away. Sassy stared at her sensor. Lieutenant, we have multiple objects approaching from the ring. I count 100 plus. What are they? Verlin asked. Shadow Tech vessels, and they're on fast approach. He lingered for as long as he could. Then he walked away from his body. Through the ether. The waft had been too much for him. He knew it. He knew he was sacrificing himself for his wife and his friends when he tried it. There was really no thought in the matter. To offer his life for theirs was an honor and a privilege. So Captain Davidge's soul drifted away from his dead body that Kai, dear Kai, struggled with. Just drop me, Kai. It's all right. Get yourself to safety. He went to whatever awaited him and hopefully waited for Syg. He hoped he had long to wait, that she must get through this, raise their son, and be a good mother. Then, when she was done, she will join him here, and hand in hand, they will go to the lands beyond. He went a short ways and thought he could see a gallery in the distance, full of loved ones and fallen comrades. They beckoned to him. He smiled and was eager to join them. No! No! Soft arms came around his waist, and he turned. There was Syg. What are you doing? Where are you going? I'm gone, Syg. I'm done. I'm sorry. You're not leaving me and our son to raise. I lay there on the Black Hat stone and forced my heart to beat for you and for our son. I fought to live, and you are going to do the same. You are going to endure the fires of hell and toil as we work through this, and then you are going to suffer me and my ravings as our son progresses to term. I don't envy you what you're going to suffer with me. You walk towards paradise. I offer you pain and hardship, frustration and love with me and our son. Syg took him by the hand and pulled him back to the sorry scene in Xandarr Keep. Come on, Dav, we've got work to do. When paradise calls, we'll go to it together. Dav's soul and Syg's soul, hand in hand, returned to what awaited them. Paradise. is where you find it. And with that, we conclude part 3, chapter 16, under Xandarr Keep. So, Ki and Syg managed to kill a lot of Holgismen and STTs with her little silver tech bubble. Syg, already being weakened from her ordeal with Princess Rock, is exhausted and she falls, and Dav isn't moving. As we see in the very last part of the chapter there, Dav was dead and his soul was moving away, but Syg, her soul, seeing him depart, grabbed him and threw him back into his body, not letting him go. He was dead, but he is not anymore. Now he is alive. Inez also is alive. And so is Tweeter. He just, like a little trooper, just reformed after Princess Rock cut him in thrice. And he assisted Ki in defeating a Holgisman. And he led them to one of the tunnels underneath Xandarr Keep just in the nick of time before the courtyard was overrun with Holgismen and Black Hats. They go to explore the tunnel, and they are met by hundreds of people. Who these people are, we're not sure. We will find out next week. Part 3, Chapter 17, The King of Xandar. So we're moving along nicely. Also, the engineers managed to hook up just basic controls to the helm, and helmsman Sari, which is spelled S-A-A-R-I. Some people think it's like sorry, like you're sorry, or I'm sorry. It's not. It's Sari. S-A-A-R-I. Wouldn't do that to one of my characters' name or sorry. Really? Jeez. So, next week, we will get back to the matter at hand. Chapter 17, The King of Xandar. I wonder who that is, because we all know the king is dead. Until then, this is Ren Presents. I am your host, Ren. Peace.